Hello to all the members of First Baptist Church of Baldwin Park. This is a special message from Pastor Bowers. 73 years ago this month, in May of 1948, the First Baptist Church of Baldwin Park was founded. Now, the world took note of a lot of the events that happened in 1948. It was a special, eventful year. Israel was recognized for the first time as a new nation by the United Nations. Mahatma Gandhi was assassinated that year. Just like now, there was a pandemic that threatened the world. In that case, the pandemic was polio, and a vaccine was still 7 years off in the future. Harry Truman was elected as the President of the United States in 1948 after finishing out the term of Franklin Roosevelt, who had died in office. There were a lot of inventions in the year 1948. The LP record was invented. The transistor radio was invented that year. And Velcro was invented in 1948. The most popular game in America in 1948 was a board game called Lexico. Later on, the name would be changed to Scrabble. Now, one thing that probably almost no one in the world took note of in 1948 was that our church began. In May of 1948, just 3 years after the end of World War II, many of the GIs who were coming back to America moved to California. They were ready to find a job and start a family. In the suburb of Baldwin Park, which is 12 or 13 miles from downtown Los Angeles, it was considered to be a good, affordable place to buy a home and start a new life. At that time, there was no Baptist church in Baldwin Park, so the members of Calvary Baptist Church of the nearby town of El Monte, California, decided that they would start one. One of their church members, a man named Troy Morris, lived in Baldwin Park, and he made his garage available to hold a church service. And our church began 73 years ago this month when the Calvary Baptist Church of El Monte held a worship service in the garage of Troy Morris. Now, no one in our church today knew Troy Morris. And years ago, when I read the history of our church and about our beginnings, I went around and spoke to some of the old timers. None of them knew Troy Morris either. After all, this was 73 years ago. But I thank God for that man. And I thank God for the other members of the Calvary Baptist Church. I'm thankful that they had enough vision to see decades into the future, because here we are 73 years later because of them. I'm thankful for the selfless sacrifice of those church members, because they were starting something that they would never benefit from personally. But they sacrificed and gave of themselves out of love for God and a concern for future generations of people who would live in Baldwin Park, people they would never know and probably never even meet. It's likely that most of the members of the Calvary Baptist Church in 1948, it's likely that most of them are long dead. I know that the Calvary Baptist Church of El Monte no longer exists. Somewhere along the way, they closed their doors for good. But we exist, at least in part, because of them. One day, our church will no longer exist. Just like people, churches live and eventually die. That's why our church is investing in the future. In 1948, the community of Baldwin Park demographically was primarily white and black. Today, in 2021, Baldwin Park is primarily Hispanic and Asian. And so that's why our church is investing in the future by investing in our two sister churches that meet in the same building we meet in. The Filipino Community Church, who recently changed their name to the Bible Community Church of Baldwin Park in an attempt to be more inclusive in their name, and Iglesia Remanente, which is a Spanish language congregation. These two churches are the future of Baldwin Park, the future of the Lord's work in Baldwin Park. And by investing our money, our resources, our prayers, by investing in these two churches, you might say that we're paying forward a debt that we owe to the Calvary Baptist Church of El Monte. Churches live, and eventually churches die, but God's work carries on. And we, through our investment, will have a part in God's work in Baldwin Park for generations to come. May God bless you all today, and happy anniversary.